Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the Council, it's my pleasure to bring to you the March City Manager Report, summarizing all the activities for the month of February. We'll just jump right in and talk about important dates as we usually do. It's a little bit of a light month going into March, so not too much to put on your docket yet, but the Legislative Forum, which will occur on March 9th, a continuation of the Chamber's Legislative Forums, will be occurring at 9:30 at the State Fair Center. The March for Meals on Wheels will be 11:30 at the Parker Building on March 12th. A really great opportunity if you haven't taken one yet to get involved in that program. Minot Commission of Aging does a great job with that. March 18th, the City Council meeting next will be held at 5:30 in Chambers here. The 23rd will be the next Legislative Forum at 9:30, again at the State Fair Center. 25th, we'll have two meetings, the library merger meeting at the Minot Public Library at 1 o'clock, and then the Planning Commission will be held at 6:30 in Chambers here. On the 26th and 27th, it's the North Dakota League of Cities March Madness. It's a training for elected and appointed officials and staffers to be held all day on each day in Bismarck. And then finally, April 1st, we're back at it again with another City Council meeting at 5:30 in Council Chambers. So let's talk about the legislative process, and we've reached a milestone in the legislative process. It's called crossover. It happened on February 22nd, and that's where all the bills that start in one side of the chamber switch sides to the other chamber and go through the same hearing process. Just to give you a sense of the activity that's gone on this year or this legislative session, it's been quite busy. We almost set a record for the number of bills that were introduced. There were a total of 963 filings. Of those, 546 were bills on the House side, 361 were bills on the Senate side, and then of course there were several resolutions on each side as well. So we've been tracking quite a bit of these. In fact, I'll get to the specific tracking of the bills that we have had interest in and kind of their status to a certain degree. As of crossover, 269 Senate bills will make it over to the House side, and 351 House bills will make it over to the Senate side. Did I say that right? Senate to the House, House to the Senate. The 80th day has been pushed out from April 26th to May 2nd. So we do have a little bit of it's not an extension because it's still an 80-day period, but it has been pushed out because they didn't gavel in all of the days we expected them to. There were five tax cap bills, all failed, so they will not be crossing over. The Senate Bill 2166 was voted down just recently. That would have quadrupled the city's tort liability from $1 million to $4 million, and not just this city's, but every political subdivisions. And it would have likely doubled the insurance premiums that the city pays for liability insurance. Just so you know, we pay north of $500,000 in insurance liability coverage. So that would have doubled as well, likely. House Bill 1066 gets a Senate hearing tomorrow. This is the Prairie Dog Bill. And so far, we think it's in good shape. Again, keep in mind, this is where our Hub City funding formula is located. So we tend to, we hope that will benefit as well as we have been instructed we will, if that passes. And then Senate Bill 2020 gets a House hearing this Thursday, and the mayor and I will be going down along with some staff and members of the Source River Joint Board. That is the appropriation bill for the State Water Commission. And of course, as you know, what is of still great concern for us is the money that has been allocated to the Mouse River Enhanced Flood Protection Plan is not enough for us to keep the momentum that we had been counting on. So we'll want to speak to that on Thursday. The bills that we've been monitoring since the start of the session number 105. That means we've had to somehow either read and study and evaluate, testify on, either for or against, or watch, or be involved in amendments, or all of that sort of stuff. This is tremendous work. I can't stress how much time goes into the legislative session, but I can't stress enough how important that work is for our community and for communities all around the state. So it's extremely valuable time. It's just pretty intense. Of these bills, 42 that we've been monitoring have been voted down, and therefore we don't have to monitor them any longer after the crossover. The remaining bills, 63 or so, we are going to have to continue to monitor, and we've already started testifying on them in the other chamber. So still a lot of work to do. Now we have to look forward to conference committees. We have to look forward to amendments and other sorts of deviations from the original intended language and those sorts of things. So still a large lift ahead of us, and you should just be aware that that is continuing behind the scenes. Of the bills that I just mentioned, we have 8 that we're actively supporting, 8 that we're actively opposed to, and then 48 that we're watching, which may or may not be something that we need to get a little bit more active in, either opposing or supporting. So I put these up. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I put them up for the public and for your benefit. And of course, this presentation will be memorialized on the website. So anyone who wants to know the city's position or what we're doing or that sort of stuff can see all these bill numbers, and it's easy to track them at the North Dakota legislative website. Additionally, all of our testimony, I think most of our testimony, I should say, has been put into the city's website as well, and the public should have access to that as well.
Tom, in terms of how we're tracking these bills, are we using the state's legislative bill tracking system that they have sort of internal attached to the legislature? And if so, is that something that we can make public and available and shareable too, in terms of, I think there is that ability to actually share those lists and have them kind of transferred around.
Yes, Mayor Sitma, Alderman Wolski, we're using multiple legislative trackers. We have some for the water organizations. We have some for North Dakota League of Cities, the Attorneys Association. There are a number of different associations, and the reason we do that is because some bills aren't a concern for one association or another association, so we're kind of tracking multiples. It would be very unwieldy for us to try to get all of that information and continue to track that. Anyone who's interested can go to the same associations. Like the North Dakota League of Cities has their bill tracker online, for example. I really would rather not have to administer theirs with others and ours and all of that. Please, that would be enormous work for us as well. But they are out there, and anyone who's interested, we can help guide people to them if they have specific questions. That would be absolutely appropriate, but it's a lot. Hopefully that's answered your question. All right, continuing on, we'll move to the International Economic Development Council report in progress. As you know, the stakeholders group met, not too long ago, maybe 6 weeks or so ago, and in those meetings, we had several of those meetings, we were able to get reports from technical teams, and that information has been synthesized now into a fairly easy to read one-page gap document, essentially which characterizes all of the gaps from all of the different technical teams and puts it into one concise document. That document has become sort of the work plan for the steering committee, which has now met twice. And the steering committee is an 8-member team right now, which is composed of myself, the mayor, Mr. Tim Mahalik, the executive directors of Visit Minot, MADC, the Chamber, and then we have the president of the Downtown Business and Professionals Association. Feels like I'm missing one more person.
Source Basin.
Source Basin, the executive director for the Source Basin Planning Council. So that is the group. We've had 2 meetings, and we've gone through this document that I just referenced, and have agreed that that document is an accurate summary of all of the gaps. We've been working to identify which organizations may provide some services or might be interested in providing more services to help close those gaps. We've gone through 3 of the 6 or 7 organizations right now, so that work will continue. We're going to identify the kinds of resources that are needed to fill the gaps and which organization is best in the best position to maybe take on those resources or to provide those resources and take on those tasks. So all of that is kind of continuing. There'll be a lot more that will come out of that group. We sort of see this as a long process, which we're trying to move through quickly. But there are a couple of recommendations that I want to bring to you that the group has made. The first one is that The stakeholder group, you might recall several weeks back, had made a recommendation that the city get more involved, and essentially that's what, in economic development, and of course that's what almost every single one of the technical team reports suggested as well. There was a recommendation that was made by Mr. Mahalik at the stakeholders group meeting for the city to formally move on hiring an economic development specialist. That was discussed also at the steering committee level, and a motion was made and seconded, and it was unanimously supported at that level as well. So I will be putting together a job description. I'll be working with the HR director and other staff members to evaluate what that position might look like, what its cost might be, and bring that back for your consideration. I hope maybe at the next council meeting. A couple things about this that we're envisioning at the moment is that this would be a fairly higher level staff position that would report to the Community and Economic Development Director, who would oversee this position, and essentially be an individual that would work as a liaison between all of the economic development agencies and lead the gaps that the city ends up getting identified as appropriate to lead for itself. There was a second motion, or a recommendation, I should say, that was made by the steering committee, and that is to approve the One Brand Committee's recommendation to hire a consultant to execute their One Brand marketing and branding campaign and apply to the Magic Fund for the financing of that particular campaign. So that will be something that will move through the process, and you will also eventually be able to see and weigh in on when and if that application does get through the Magic Fund screening committee and then eventually to the City Council. So a lot of activity still going on, a lot of movement and I think momentum, which is very positive for our community on the economic development front. Next, I wanted to talk about the filling of our Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Brian Billingsley, who is currently been the Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Caldwell, Idaho, has accepted our offer to join as our Community and Economic Development Director. He's slated to start the first week of April. He has 25 years of planning and community development experience. The town that he currently works in is about a little bit larger than our town right now, about 55,000. He does have experience with downtown revitalization. The City of Caldwell has done some amazing things over the last decade or so in helping to revitalize their community. He does have experience with river space designs. The Indian Creek corridor has also been completely redesigned and accentuated. That was very, very exciting to see as well. And he also has experience in developing and implementing gathering spaces. The City of Caldwell did do a downtown gathering space on about a 1-acre piece of property. They incorporated an ice skating rink and some other amenities as well. So some of the very similar experience that we're just in projects that we're just about to undertake ourselves. He does have Midwest roots, except for the 10 or 11 years or so that he spent in Caldwell. He spent the remainder of that in the Midwest, so he's familiar with our climate. He's familiar with sort of the Midwest culture and those sorts of things, which is all very good as well. So I think he'll be a good fit for our community, and he's very, very excited about the position as well. Okay, next I want to update you a little bit on the NDR, National Disaster Resiliency progress. A little bit on the gathering space. You know, HUD did issue our release of funds, which is great because now that sort of allows us to go full steam ahead, and we are doing just that. We've placed 8 offers to various property owners in and around the location of the gathering space. We're awaiting counter offers at this point in time. Our offers were based on the city's assessed value plus 10% or so. We do have this cost reasonableness threshold that we have to ensure that we meet with HUD. And we have to be able to justify that. So that's going to be a guide for us as we move forward. Keep in mind again, through the amendments, the waiver, we were able to receive $2.5 million for acquisition, demolition, and restoration, leaving the remainder of the $6 million, which would be about $3.5 million, for construction of all of the amenities in the site. So we're excited. We do hope that we'll be able to keep this moving. And there will be more to come, certainly, as we get offers and go through that, that exchange. As it relates to the City Hall project, this has been something that has been a long time in the works as well. We did, I'm proud to say, maybe relieved or happy or excited to say, we finally were able to get through the waiver process with Housing and Urban Development. And they published finally our waiver in the Federal Register, allowing us to move forward on the City Hall relocation project. This is critical, as you might know, for a number of different reasons I'll get to in just a moment. But I do want to say that the first time that the city submitted the waiver was in 2016. That was denied at that point in time. And HUD had said to the city, we don't believe that you have made adequate progress on fulfilling the needs of the vulnerable population. So go do that first and then come back to us. Well, several years later, and some significant advancements in our work, we submitted another waiver. I want to say it was a year from last November. That got stalled in the process. We had to prove a few things up, and we worked with HUD to do that. And then we resubmitted the waiver last summer, late last summer or so, and that's been working through its process. We expected to have this earlier, about December of last year, except that the government shutdown kind of got in the way of that. And so that delayed things for a couple months. But we're very excited about this. We're excited for a number of reasons, and I want to remind the community and the council, because I don't think many of you were on the city council when the city submitted its application for the City Hall project. But there were several reasons for the project. First of all, maybe first and foremost, was the threat that the flood had on this building, and in particular the emergency operations and the dispatch center. That was significant. In addition, the economic resilience part of relocating City Hall into buildings downtown and bringing a workforce downtown to help revitalize downtown was also mentioned. This building, we're jammed full with staff in this building. There's really no place to grow. You just saw, just last week, we moved the copy machine practically into the hallway to make room for a staff member in the copy room. So we have people in closets, copy rooms. I mean, it's all over the place. So what's important about this project is not just the fact that it provides space for our staff. We have no space for the council right now. None of you have offices. The mayor does not have an office. We have no meeting rooms for you. There's a number of needs that we have, and this will help that. What also this does, it'll help us from having to expand multiple buildings in the next several years. You know that the Public Works building was expanded in 2016, and they're at least 85 to 95% at capacity right now in many of the spaces that they have. So if we can take pressure off of this building and allow this building to accommodate some of the activities that's going on in the auditorium, make the auditorium more marketable since we're not occupying city spaces in there, make this building more spacious for the police station and the municipal court, and move around a number of our different operations, and at the same time centralize those operations so that we have outward-facing services available to the community in a one-stop shop location. We feel like that's a huge benefit too. What's also important about this project is that the green light for the City Hall relocation allows us to incorporate now the Center for Technical Education. You might recall the CTE project was sort of limping along there. There's just not significant money, $1.5 million when HUD came back and asked us to reduce our budgets. That $1.5 million, based on talking with the leadership of the CTE project, just wasn't enough to float that project on its own. So we have since talked with HUD and others about maybe combining the CTE with the City Hall and using the money together to create a co-located facility. And that looks like that approach may allow for the CTE to get revived and maybe get located downtown, which would also be a benefit for downtown as well. So a lot of different benefits that are being achieved here through this project. There's a lot of work that has to be done. Let me share some of that with you here too. First, let's get to the funding. There's $3.75 million that the city has received in the NDR grant for the City Hall building. There's $1.5 million that is separately received for the CTE that I just mentioned, but if we consolidate that into a co-located facility, we can use that money. However, we do have to provide a CTE. We can't just use the money for City Hall and not provide a CTE. And then lastly, there was some sales tax dollars that was set aside by the council in the tune of about $1 million. So that provides about $6.2 million of available funding. That is to finance the entire project. And I can tell you right now that will not be enough. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but I can tell you that's not going to be enough. I've been involved in a couple City Hall projects in my day. I don't want to tell you what those ones went for, but they were very different circumstances and very different sizes. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a space analysis. We're going to have to figure out what kind of space do we need as a city, and what kind of spaces do we want located together, for example, because that'll dictate the space demands. Then we'll have to apply those space demands against a available building inventory. And so assessing the various buildings and what kind of spaces those buildings might have available for us is going to be important. And then, of course, a condition assessment of those buildings is also going to be important because we have a cost as well as a space situation that we have to manage. Eventually, we choose the property. Depending upon the property and depending upon how confident we are in the property and whatnot, we may want to make a contingent offer. HUD has very specific rules about contingent offers that we'd have to follow. An environmental review would have to take place. We'd have to make the same requests as we did for the gathering space for the release of funds. That can take some time. And then finally, if we haven't made an offer, we'd make an offer, or we fulfill the contingent offer that we had made earlier in the process. Keep in mind, all of this activity and every dime that goes to this project or these projects has to be invoiced and spent by September 30th of 2022. All righty, a lot of work to do. A couple other things on NDR. The Housing and Urban Development has told us, and we're continuing a trend here, which is very nice. They like what we're doing. They're comfortable with what we're doing, and essentially we're not going to be the subject of an audit this year, which is great. We like to have that kind of confidence. We take that very seriously. We do not want to give any reason for needing to have an audit because of concerns. I mean, from time to time, it makes sense to have audits to make sure everybody's doing things right. But we don't want the reason for those audits to be people are concerned about what we're doing. So that's good news. We continue to hunt down zombie homes. We've purchased 5. We have 2 more that we expect to be able to purchase here, and the demolition of those is expected to occur this spring. Park South has been very successful as a project, and I wanted to bring this to your attention because there's been some conversation recently about the need or lack thereof of low to moderate income housing. Keep this in mind, 40 of the 41 units in Park South are essentially occupied right now. So that highlights the demand of the low to moderate income housing we have in our community. Another thing that's important which plays into this is that HUD has just adjusted the LMI limits for low income thresholds for families of 4, and I put that up here for you as well. It's kind of hard to believe, but this says a lot about our community, and these are all based on regional and local trends. But low income for a family of 4 is now considered $69,700. And I couldn't believe that. I had to check that out, but that is true. Again, keep in mind it's for a family of 4. Very low income is $43,550. Extremely low, $26,150. What this means is that as those thresholds continue to go up, the bracket widens for those who need low to moderate income housing. And so there will be continued demands on low to moderate income housing as those thresholds go up and more people qualify for low to moderate income housing. So just a couple things to keep in mind. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much here, but I do want to let you know that we will be having a separate presentation near the end of our meeting today to talk about the brand new capital improvement plan. It's new and improved. It's a 5-year capital plan. It has enormous information in it. Information that I think you will find very, very helpful, particularly as we move forward over the next half decade on identifying and moving forward to completing various projects. 154 pages long, full of information. It's available on the website if people are interested in it. Our city engineer, I want to give absolute props to. Mr. Lance Meyer has done a phenomenal job leading this project for the city. He has gone above and beyond and has just knocked it out of the park. That being said, this is a document that's a work in process. We want to hear your feedback tonight, and we'll save it for when Mr. Meyer comes and gives you the presentation. But it will evolve year over year. It'll get better and better as we go along. I also want to thank the department heads, because under their leadership, with their teams, they were able to develop enormous detail about the needs that they have in their departments. And each department was asked to rate and rank their projects using a uniform criteria that they developed within their department, so that we knew we were going to be working on the highest priorities in that priority order. So more to come on that when Mr. Meyer talks with you, but very, very excited about this. Next, we're also excited that we'll have 50% more seats to Denver. United Airlines is adding another flight to Denver this summer. They're going to test that market and see if they can sustain that, which is good news. This is great because obviously it means the market's strong. And it also means maybe with that kind of market we might see a little bit more competition, and that may drive some prices down. It may also add potentially the desirability of airlines to either come to Minot or perhaps even add more flights to different locations. So we're excited about that. Nothing's a guarantee, of course, but we want to celebrate this accomplishment. I want to thank our airport director for working hard as he continuously does to improve the airport servicing for our community. Lastly, I wanted to invite Sarah White, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but also Sergeant Paul Burns and then the police chief up to the front here. You know, I want to just say really quickly that the police department, under the leadership of our police chief, Jason Olson, does an absolute fabulous job of making sure that at least annually his staff is formally recognized for the outstanding accomplishments and achievements that they perform each and every day in the community. And I just couldn't be happier that he's made this a priority for his staff and for our city. And that's why it's important to me to bring him up and give him an opportunity to share a few words about the accomplishments of both of his staff members, and for you to formally see and recognize them as well. So, Chief.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, each year the police department recognizes an employee, a civilian employee of the year, and an officer of the year. These employees are nominated by their peers, and there's a selection committee of their peers that goes through the nominations and selects each year's winner. And for the employee of the year this year, as City Manager Berry said, it was Sarah White, who works in our investigations department. She's been with us for 3 years. And is an outstanding employee for us. She was unable to be here tonight. She works as a dance instructor, and she had a dance class that she was teaching right now, so she was unable to be here. But I do want to take a second to just recognize Sergeant Paul Burns. Paul's been with our department for 23 years. Paul has been a leader from day one. He works on our afternoon shift, has been a sergeant on the patrol force on the afternoon shift for many years. That's where he likes to be. That's where he's bid every year, and has just provided outstanding leadership for our men and women on the street, making sure that things are done right. I once told Paul, he asked me how I slept at night after I became police chief, and I told Paul I sleep better when I know that you're on the desk working down here, because I know things are getting done right, and I absolutely mean that. In addition to providing outstanding work as a sergeant, Paul's dedicated to his nation. He has been in the United States Air Force, in the Army National Guard, in the Air Force Reserve, and twice been deployed during his service. He also serves his community. He spearheads each year the Cops and Kids program each holiday season, in making sure that kids have a better holiday season. And the last couple of years, he's included the Stuff a Squad project to that, where we get all kinds of toys to go to underprivileged kids. And Paul has just been a leader in that. So I just want to recognize Paul and thank him for his service and congratulate him on this award. So thank you.
Well, with that, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, City Manager Barry. Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, just one thought out of the gate here about it seems like we're going to maybe move into a new shift in some of the NDR projects. And I think we're going to have to turn around and double down the efforts back to the public of kind of re-educating everybody that this is the dollar amount, this is what it can and can't be spent for. I think we all understand that because we've been in it for a long time, but the ongoing conversations that we are wasting money about the gathering place, and I understand those sentiments. However, we're pretty locked in of what we can and can't do, and I think every time we start talking about it now, we have to maybe lead off with where the money's coming from, reiterate what we can and can't spend it on. So, and I guess I bring that up with my my favorite city clerk to my right. I came up to City Hall today and I realized that she's no longer in her office with her counterpart. She's been moved into what we formerly called the printer room. And so, Kelly, congratulations on your new office. And so if anybody thinks that it's not an issue, it's clearly been an issue. And so I look forward to those discussions moving forward. I guess one other, I forgot, so I'll yield my time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Straight. Any further questions for City Manager Barry?